this place that we are right now doesn't work very well for agile transformation. Bringing the people together into an office, working around the whiteboard, solutioning around the whiteboard, it's very efficient, right? I'm not saying that you should only be in the office, but there is value in being in the office. There is value in being at home as well.
Not everyone makes the news, but behind every growth-driving experience, product, and transformation are experts who shape the outcome. Welcome to Behind the Growth, a podcast for digital leaders and those aspiring to become one. Each episode features a candid conversation with a remarkable individual. Join us as we focus on their struggles, wins, and lessons learned you won't find anywhere else. Let's get started.
Welcome to Behind the Growth. I'm your host, Mudassar Malik, and today we're celebrating Sorin Hogiu, digital transformation expert. Welcome to the show, Sorin.
Thank you, Mudassar, and thank you for the opportunity. It's great to be here.
I appreciate you joining us. Sorin, you're a passionate team leader, and you have an amazing career working across multiple industries and geographies. But before we get to that, I would love for you to share more about your journey.
I'm originally from Romania. I've started developing in 98, 99. Well, and of course, before that in school, I finished applied electronics and computer science. In Romania, it's a bit different, cold over there. And then I really focused more towards computer science. Started my first job in 98, 99. Initially as a sysadmin for a cable network company. It seems very strange going out of computer science, but that's where I learned networking. I learned how to work with emails, how to create websites, how to set them up for our clients. Then I moved into software development, working in Romania, worked in Germany as well, traveled between Romania and Germany for a few years, stayed in Germany for a few more years. Java was my go-to language. And then in 2006 is when we arrived over here in Canada. And of course, I applied for jobs. My first job was with Logitech, software developer, senior software developer in Java. And then the first job was, let's make sure that this website doesn't crash overnight. And it was the Logitech website, the very famous Harmony remotes. All the setup was done over the internet. So I had to jump into VB6 and apply my learnings from Java into VB6. Really exciting. But then transitioned out of that job in 2010 and moved into software consulting, different companies, took the learnings from Logitech, Agile Transformation, and used those learnings and applied them to different companies. Lately, the last few years, I've been with RBC as a technology lead, as a senior director, leading the Agile transformation on the Omni program, and really embraced Agile at a huge financial institutions. And last year, I've started with BMO, where I've been focusing on the same Agile transformation. And that's where I'm leading and I'm the head of branch technology over there.
Wonderful. Sorin, just wondering, was financial industry by choice, or did you stumble into it? And how did that story pan out for you?
It's actually something that I resisted with all my heart. When I left Logitech, my manager were trying to convince me to stay, and they were saying, "What are you going to do? You're going to move into financial industry and not going to do anything else." And I'm like, "I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm not going to do the financials." So then what I tried is to say, okay, let me see what other companies are there. And I work for Loblaws as a software consultant on everything that it's about traceability, knowing what exactly is in all the products that are on the shelves. Then moved into Intuit, working with them on their financial software, the tax software company, right? And then I work with AutoTrader. If you're looking on their website, the Trader IQ, it's one of my first deliveries with them. And then I tried different companies, but then decided that okay, let's give it a shot to these financial industries, the big behemoths in Toronto.
Let's see what all the fuss is about, huh?
But I really was surprised to see that Agile transformation is hitting them as well, right? And really embrace the culture, really saw that they are really open to change and really open to try and work on projects differently than others.
That's tremendous. And, rightly so. I think Agile transformation really suits the industry, and I think it had a lot of application. And so let's build on this one. And I would want to start with let's get the basics out of the way. So my first question would be, help us understand what Agile transformation is and what are the primary benefits?
What Agile is, it really depends on how you're approaching it. The way I see it is changing how an organization works. Usually they work on waterfall, knowing and going very deep into the requirements of the project, creating the architecture of the project, and then starting the implementation of the project. This is a huge upfront investment of the company until you actually get into the implementation phase and into the releasing that project. But Agile is working more iteratively, taking this huge upfront investment and making it into smaller iterations, working on changing on how you work on the projects, changing how you work on the applications. But it's also changing the culture internally. It's about empowering individuals. It's making sure that the decisions are done in a structure that is bottom up and it's not top down. It's a structure that actually gives the opportunity for individuals to try new things, to try to deploy new things to production. But what is the most important is the collaboration with customers. It's working with them very closely on what they need to deliver and then responding to change, having that feedback with the customer and showing them, this is what I've delivered. What do you think about it? Should we change about? And then it's delivering very quickly those feedback that comes from the customers and deploying them into production. You ask about the benefits. The benefits, the way I see them, it is primarily on building the right thing. You're not going to stay 2 years in a project and then deliver it to the customers and then figuring out that you need to do 100 more CRs to change that project. CRs, I mean change requests, right? And change that application that you just delivered and making sure that you deliver the right thing for the clients. But building the right things in a priority order. You're going to build the most important first, and then you're building on top of it, and you're delivering that incremental value to the clients initially, right? It's about improving your return of investment. You're not going to work for 2 years and figuring out that you actually failed at the end of the 2 years. You're going to work for, 6 months, 3 months, 2 months, 1 month, right? And you're going to see that this feature that I've just enabled it for my clients, it actually doesn't work. So let me go back and pivot, right? Go into a different direction. It's about the rapid idea deployment into production. It's about trying new things. And it's not only trying new things at the application level, but also trying new things on how people work. You're going to see these benefits, right? And of course, the continuous improvement. This is where this continuous feedback, working with the clients, working with your internal people and trying to see, should I organize my teams differently? Should I actually do more experiments? Should I try some different technology that is going to deliver value quicker to our clients?
Such a great compliment. I was listening to you, and such a great compliment to digital transformation. I think it just so work is like hand in glove.
Of course. Yeah.
All right. So, and then I'm also thinking that agile transformation would involve a mindset shift. Like, I think you kind of touched upon it. Within an organization, you would absolutely need a mindset shift. But how do you approach it? And what are the strategies that you found effective in driving that shift?
I'm going to tell you a story, actually, very interesting, right? So I came from RBC, where I was leading almost 200 developers with a counterpart, of course. I was leading the Agile transformation, but more from the architecture perspective, figuring out how you can actually evolve it more incrementally, where my counterpart was more like from the people management perspective, right? And we said, okay, this is a great playbook. We can apply it into a different company. So I joined BMO at the beginning of last year. And then I said, okay, let me observe how the team works. And that's what you need to do first, right? You don't go there and say, you should go and be agile overnight. And we actually tried that, right? So the teams, when I joined them, they had a meeting every Friday to show them to show me and some other people what they have been doing the last week. And I'm like, this is a sprint review. We can call it sprint review. And then this is agile, right?
Yeah.
Not so much, right? Then you can look into, okay, how you can add it more on top, and then how you can add it more. But it doesn't work like that. You cannot come and say you're agile overnight because the people are not ready. You need to be more strategic. And you can have different strategies here. You can build it on the side and say, okay, I'm going to build it on the side and then slowly phase out the other approach. Or you can build it within. We decided to build it within. And you have to be very strategic there, right? You cannot go overnight and say, okay, you're called agile and you're going to work agile. You need to be very, very methodical. You have to look from different perspective here. Looking at the scope, what is the project? What is the applications that you need to approach here, right? How is the process? How you're deploying these applications? How you're changing these applications? You need to look from those perspectives. Of course, you need to look on how you're structuring your teams. Do you have 5 teams? Do you have 10 teams? Do you have bigger teams, smaller, bigger deliverables, longer time cycles, or you have smaller teams and you deliver more incrementally? Of course, you need to make those teams more independent. The more independent they are, the easier it is to develop. And then definitely software development, engineering needs to be in your mind, how those teams work together. Quality engineering. Do you create a team that is fully empowered to do everything, or do you throw it over the fence and then another team does quality? You can try both, but the whole idea is you need to do experiments over here as well. How you create your teams and how you structure your teams can be a continuous experiment. What we've said at BMO is that we actually use Agile to build Agile, right? We actually took those Agile principles to say, okay, we empower the people, individuals, contributors over process and tools, right? Looking at the Agile manifesto. And we said, how can we apply it here into how we are building Agile? And we are able to actually bring those ideas to life. But what you never have to forget is that it's all about people and culture. You're building a culture of innovations. You need to build a culture of innovation. You need to always consider people in the front of everything because they will be the ones working on it, right? When it comes to execution, of course, it's about the phase approach. You can't go overnight and say you shall be called agile. But the way we've done it is let's start with one team. Let's see how it works, define a blueprint for that team on how you're working on it, and then say, okay, let's apply it to a second team. Let's apply it to fourth, fifth team. And then it's about scaling. How do you bring the old organizations into the new structure? Do you do it overnight? How do you define your vertical slices? You need to remove the boundaries between the teams and allow them to collaborate very closely. And this is not easy to be done. It all depends on the projects. It all depends on the application that we work on. And nothing can be successful without involving your business partners. Your business partners, your customers needs to be with you in these transformations. They need to be side by side, and together you have to work on this transformation. It needs to be a transformation on both sides.
Fantastic. Such a fantastic lowdown of everything as a walkthrough that you gave. Work out in phases. And something that caught my attention, and I'm just curious, like you said, the team structure doesn't have to be the same. And you having worked on Agile transformation in multiple institutions, that's a very interesting insight. And, although it's a similar industry vertical, it's just still differently from one to another? How, just expand a bit more on that one.
Let me give you another example, right? At RBC, right? What I tried is, let's organize a team that is very dynamic, right? A team that has a senior, intermediate, a junior developers all working together. It was a team of about 5-6 people, right? And we said, okay, this team is going to be nimble, is going to have a bit of seniority, not enough seniority. We might need to guide them a bit more on the transformation. And that proved to be right. But they were very willing to change, very aware of their limitations and really open to new ideas on how to implement things. We've tried something similar with a different team, but we said, okay, this problem is very complex. So we need to build a more senior team that actually has these ideas of how to implement software, how to build software very intrinsic in their mind. And we built a team with only senior people. It actually proved that this team wasn't as successful as the other one. It ended up for us that you need to look into how these teams operate. And we ended up reshuffling the team members to make it more dynamic, to make it a bit more nimble. These ideas you'll need to experiment. You will not know exactly what works well for the best for your organizations without trying them out, right? Experiments are at the code level on how you organize your code, how you work on the code, but experiments needs to be at how your teams work as well. We've seen that creating a team that has 4 or 5 developers actually works the best. They need to be empowered to not only work on the code, but also be responsible with the quality of the code, right? And not having another team that actually takes care of testing the things out. It works better for us, right? And that's what we've applied in other teams as well, in other companies.
Fantastic. Does it also require a dash of fun in there? Is there an element of that too?
You always have the sprint reviews. You always have the opportunity to reflect on what you've done. But the fun needs to be part of the building the culture. You need to bring the people out. You need to bring the people to some events. We've done that in various companies, of course. Going for a drink on a Thursday, right? We call it the thirstiest Thursday, and every Thursday it's a bit thirsty for us. And people will go out for drinks. Sometimes not all the people will be there, but people will come, and that's where you actually do the bonding.
Yeah.
This place that we are right now doesn't work very well for Agile transformation. Bringing the people together into an office, working around the whiteboard, solutioning around the whiteboard, it's very efficient, right? I'm not saying that you should only be in the office, but there is value in being in the office. There is value in being at home as well. As a developer, working on a code without interactions, without anyone coming over the shoulder and asking what you're doing is very efficient. We've seen that in different companies as well. But at the same time, when you're in the office and you're just turning around and asking a questions and you get the answers right away, that's very efficient as well, right? You need to have a balance of both. And I feel that this hybrid mode is actually the best way going forward.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with you on that. I think hybrid is really the way to go now. So coming back onto this one, how do you measure success for Agile transformation initiatives? And, how do you ensure the organization is progressing and they're progressing in the right direction?
That's a very interesting question. It really depends on the seniority of the team, right? You can define metrics. You can say, okay, you need to deliver 20 story points. You can look into the story points and say, okay, that's how much you need to deliver. But think about that everything is gameable, right? At the end, the teams are the ones that are looking in and defining the story points for each of the stories. You can cross-calibrate across teams. That's very difficult to do, right? I don't believe that two teams will give you the same estimates on the set of stories, right? That's going to take you years to be able to calibrate across. And you don't want to do that because the idea of story points is just to see how much they can work have that conversation on what needs to happen. I believe it's actually better to move away from story points into outcome-based, right? How much can I deliver? What am I delivering by working on this, right? What is my outcome at the end of a sprint, at the end of 2 sprints, a month, whatever you define it, right? And then people are working towards that outcome, and they will be able to deliver more by focusing on the most important thing first, right? Of course, what I believe it actually works better is to look into DORA metrics, right? How long does it take for you to deliver something to production, right? How many changes you're making into productions? What are the error rates when you're deploying to productions? Those are really great ideas that you can take from DORA and apply them into your organizations. But it's very important to measure initially so that you know at least what you need to do, right? But don't stop into saying, okay, these metrics needs to be hit. And if you don't hit them, there is a failure on the project. You need to adapt and understand what those metrics are giving to you, and then see how you can apply those metrics or those learnings from those metrics into how you organize your team, how you work with the team.
I think that's really what you said. I think there's a lot of discussion, and I think I love this part. What you said, it's just more focusing on the outcome rather than just going hard at the metrics. And I think that's really the right way to organize and align everybody behind what needs to be delivered or achieved in the end of the day.
Of course, yeah. What I feel that it's actually very important is to move from, you have this project-based organization. You have a project, you have a set of changes that needs to be done, to a set of tools to deliver some outcome, to more product focus. I'm building applications. I'm building a structure for the future, right? I'm building a tool that is going to be used by my financial advisor or by my branch employees to work on the application itself. Move into that aspect, right? And see how you need to organize your teams. You probably need to move from teams that are focused and organized on project, right? And you're going to have cross-functional teams to more persistent agile teams. And you might need also teams that are persistent over there, right? You'll need to look into transforming how you're funding these teams. Having the permanent teams, you need to have permanent funding for them, right? How you define the team members, what are the specialty within each team members, it really depends on the work that needs to happen and be delivered by these functional teams, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic. Sorin, with so many, you've implemented this across so many organizations, and let's bring us home with some success story on the implementation of Agile Transformation. But I would want you to share some challenges, and also how have you approached them, and are there any key lessons learned from those initiatives?
The way I've seen it very successful is by starting small, right? If you start actually big, it is not going to be easy, right? Because it's going to be very hard to do. The way I've seen it work is by having business people with technical people all together on the same transformation, right? Start by having 2 teams. This is what RBC done, right? Start with 2 journeys, have about 5 teams. We started over there, and it scaled up to more than 26 teams and organized into vertical slices, into 6 different journeys, right? Where the challenges is going to be is how do I scale my development practices? How I build a cohesion implementation across these different teams, because they will work differently, right? They will apply different ideas across those teams. And you can look into the Spotify model and say, okay, I can create chapters, I can create guilds. Chapters are where people that work on the same ideas, they get together and they share, right? Guilds is about center of interest, and I'm interested about AI. So I bring someone from UI with someone from backend, with someone from database levels together and say, okay, let's build something together and let's innovate. But you really need to allow them to experiment, allow them to pivot when they learn. It's not about the top-down approach and say you should do agile. It's about bottom-up. It's about allowing the teams to try new things. It's allowing them to try different technologies, even if this is uncomfortable for an organization like RBC, for example, right? But that's how you innovate. That's how you deliver faster. Node.js on the back end with Angular front end, it's a lot faster to develop than Java backend, for example, right? So you allow them to experiment and to see, trying new things. Will you be doing things differently? Scaling up from 5 teams to 20 plus teams is very challenging. Agile practices, scaling architecture is actually even more difficult, right? For example, you want to make sure that architecture is still preserved within, right? You still have 2, 3 layers architecture and you don't create multiple layers. You're using those practices that have been created in one team into a different team. That's where you end up creating playbooks. You end up sharing across the teams so that people are learning from each other and allowing them to move across teams and to learn from other teams, right? The biggest challenges you'll probably have is the intersection between Agile and Waterfall. You're going to see that Waterfall projects, Waterfall teams, they need upfront design. They need to know ahead of time, 3 months ahead of time, that I need to deliver something so that they can plan their teams, that they can plan their deliveries within them. That's where you need to start those discussions early on and say, how can I have people dedicated from your teams that work with my teams, right? You might want to have a contract defined between. And this is kind of against Agile, but I'm talking about the contract testing here, right? Where you're saying, I'm going to define the interface on my UI side that I'm going to interact with your backend, and defining on how these two are going to interact with each other. And that's what I'm using as a base of developing the UI, but also the backend at the same time. And then, of course, it's about integrating. You need to have these teams working independently. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of problems of scheduling ahead of time and making sure that this is delivered. Another direction that you'd have to look into is quality, right? When you have these teams that depend on each other, you need to shift left. You can't allow them to work independently and then have another cycle of testing after the development is done. You need to have your UI tested independently. You need to have your backend tested independently. And when it talks about integrations, it's only a single test that happens, right? You talk about, if you're thinking about the amount of test cases that you need to do, if you do end-to-end test, testing all the scenarios from the UI perspective, you talk about n times m, right? You have n number of test scenarios on the UI, m different tests on the backend. You're going to have a multiplier. You need to move into doing a n plus m plus 1, right? N number of tests on the UI, m number of tests on the backend, and the plus 1 is the integration, making sure that the front end talks with the backend. That's how you can structure your team. But the best is to actually take the backend teams and the front end teams to work together, right? Have them organize the teams in a way that you have your cross-functional teams into a single team. And then you don't need to worry about, okay, how do I create a contract in between these teams? How do I allow them to collaborate? Because having them co-located, working together, you're going to see that they are evolving at the same time. I'm changing the backend a bit, I'm changing the UI for the backend, and the other way around, right? And you're quickly iterating, and then you're quickly delivering features to production more quickly.
Got it. That was very, very insightful. How long did it take you to scale from 6 to 25?
About 2 years. But we were hungry for it.
Yeah.
I was really surprised to see that an organization like RBC was ready for that change, and really happy to see that Agile was embraced the way it should have been, right? I've started Agile in 2007, right? Logitech, when I joined them, they were not Agile. But then the year after, they said, okay, let's move into this new shiny thing. And then I've applied Agile since that time until now, right? And seeing that a huge financial institution is ready to try Agile, it was really opening for me, really seeing that we can apply it to a big financial institutions was really, really amazing. And don't get me wrong, we had the challenges over there as well, right? How we organize multiple teams, how we scale multiple teams, how do we scale from 5 to more, right? Starting with 2 journeys, vertical journeys, really focus on client first, right? And then scale to 25 by adding another journey, by adding more teams, really even using the powers of the previous teams that have been created and using that blueprint to apply it to the next team, right? It's all about the way we are applying it at BIMO as well, is by looking into one team and then another team and then scaling it up and adding more teams and more teams.
Got it. Wonderful. Let's also talk about what would be your advice, and especially the financial sector, the organizations who want to embark on this agile transformation journey. And then also if you could advise them on some common pitfalls to avoid.
My advice is really to start small, right? You can't transform everything overnight, right? So you have to see what works for you. Agile is not something that you're taking it from a shelf and say, this is how it will work here. You can definitely do that. And you have to do that, right? You need to know what works for others, but you'll have to adapt it. You have to take those learnings and really make sure that it works for you. You'll definitely fail, but you have to allow people to fail. You have to make sure that when they fail, they are not punished, but those learnings from those failures, you apply them into the next iteration. You apply them in a way that ideally you want to actually automate them, right? If deployment to production fails for whatever reason, because a manual step is being missed, go ask yourself, why do I have these manual steps? Shouldn't I use and implement and invest more into DevOps so that these manual steps never happen? If configuration goes all the way to production and it's a dev configuration, a development environment configuration, why do I have that? Can I change my DevOps pipeline so that it actually takes the production configuration for productions and the development configuration for development? Failures will happen, right? You can work very proactive to avoid them, but what is the most important is to make sure that you know that they will happen, right? Of course, when you're looking at pitfalls, search on the internet and you're going to see that you'll have some leadership that needs to change how they work. You'll see that it's very important to have these bottom-up empowerment teams than to have top-down and to say, okay, this is how we should do it. It's very important to set realistic goals and to allow the teams to set those goals. If you're going to set the goals for the teams will rush and they will probably take shortcuts, right? And they might not implement what you want. When you're looking into your delivery, you probably have a center of excellence, right? Make sure that the center of excellence there is for guidance. It's not for creating a process, right? If they are there for creating a process, people will start asking, what's happening here? Why do I have this? Right? Having that blueprint to say, okay, this is how we've seen that it works in the past for us is great, because then the people know how to start. It's really important to know how to start, right? Because starting a new project, it's always very hard. But then allow them to adapt, right? Not say, I need to have 3 gates into this agile process and I need to have this gate mandatory to be able to deliver something to production. That's going to block progress. The people will not come and say, I can actually deploy something to production hidden without people seeing it, and I can click a button on this UI and enable a feature to go live on production, right? This will not be created. These ideas will not be created and implementations if you're going to impose a process and say you need to have this gate with this amount of testing to go to production, right? Allow the teams to be able to adapt and to really increment on what they are doing. And of course, we talk about incremental adoption of Agile. Don't go all in. Development practices. Make sure that you consider that you have people, not resources. You have people that are working here. They have feelings. You need to work with them. You need to be very close on these Agile transformations. Some people will not be ready for the change, right? So think about how do you adapt that and what do you allow them to do if they are not ready for this change. It's not going to be easy, right? You're going to see that a lot of things will go wrong, but be persistent. We know that Agile has been around for at least 20 plus years, right? The Agile Manifesto is from 2001, but the ideas of Agile have been introduced long before, right? Even if you're looking into Toyota with their Kanban, stop the line mentality, that has been introduced long before, right? So these ideas are catching up on software developments 20 years over here. Some organizations are more mature on Agile. Some of them are still at the beginning, but all of them will go there, right? And will have the chance to go do more and more.
Fantastic. I love the answer. And you went around, you said, start small. You've touched at the leadership layer. You've talked about the whole delivery center of excellence, how the teams need to be structured, and also understanding that they're just not resources, they're humans, they have feelings, and the change and the whole process of going through is definitely something to look into, and not just putting in some practices that would stall it, but actually having some freedom.
Of course.
So fantastic. Sorin, we're coming up on our time, and I would love for you to share where can our listeners connect with you. Do you prefer that they reach out to you on LinkedIn or any other preference that you have?
Yeah, definitely on LinkedIn is the best way to go. It's where all my business collaboration is happening right now. So please reach out. I am on LinkedIn. You search my name, Sorin Hogiu, and you'll find me. Ask for a connection, and then we'll definitely continue the conversation over there. Absolutely.
Sorin, thanks again. And it's an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Growth.
Mudassar, thank you so much for the invitation. It was really great sharing my ideas and my practice on Agile Transformation.
Thank you so much, Sorin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Growth. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. This podcast is brought to you by Mobile Live, a team of digital experts specializing in designing experiences, building products, and scaling technology. For more episodes of Behind the Growth, please visit mobilelive.ca/podcast.